Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Many thanks for attending this conference. The Universidad Politécnica de Madrid is proud of having the possibility to host this conference, the Iberic Web Application Security Conference. So right now I'm going to introduce two of the conference chairs. First one, Mr. Vicente Aguilera, that is a conference chair. He is the Director of Internet Security Auditor, and also he is the Spanish chapter leader of the Open Web Application Security Project. The OWASP is a free and open community that focuses on improving application security.
Thank you very much, César. Yo voy a hablar en castellano, dado que la mayoría de asistentes sois de aquí de Madrid o de España en general, ¿no? Ante todo, bienvenidos a esta primera conferencia. Es el primer evento internacional de OWASP en nuestro país, con lo cual, bueno, es un hecho remarcable. Si bien es verdad que desde el capítulo español que fundé hace 4 años atrás, venimos realizando eventos de seguridad, sobre todo en el área de Cataluña, en Barcelona, sobre todo. Este, como digo, es el primer evento internacional que hemos realizado conjuntamente con el capítulo de Portugal, de OWASP, cuyo representante está aquí, Carlos Serrao, de presidente de OWASP Portugal. Y, bueno, para nosotros es todo un honor poder estar aquí compartiendo este espacio con la Universidad Politécnica de Madrid. Quiero agradecer también la colaboración del Comité Global de Educación de OWASP, que nos ha apoyado en la organización de este evento, y en especial a Fabio Cerullo, que está aquí con nosotros también. Sí que quiero adelantar, bueno, en 2 palabras, para aquellos que no conozcan qué es OWASP, ¿no? OWASP es una asociación sin ánimo de lucro fundada en Estados Unidos hace unos años atrás, con un claro objetivo, ¿no? El objetivo es mejorar el nivel de seguridad de las aplicaciones y servicios web, ¿no? Con ese objetivo, ¿cómo se consigue, ¿no? ¿Qué es el trabajo que hacemos? Nosotros creamos y desarrollamos tanto herramientas como documentación de forma abierta y gratuita. Ese es el estilo OWASP, ¿no? Todo open source, todo abierto, a disposición de la comunidad internacional. Y muchas de estas herramientas y proyectos de documentación se han convertido realmente en auténticos estándares y recomendados por diferentes normativas y cumplimientos, ¿no? Bien, como decía, OWASP se ha convertido en un referente a nivel internacional en temas de seguridad en aplicaciones. Nuestros proyectos, cualquiera de los aquí presentes o cualquier interesado en seguridad en aplicaciones, ya sea a nivel de perfil de desarrollador, arquitecto, pentester, jefe de proyecto, cualquier persona que de alguna u otra manera esté involucrada en el campo de la seguridad en aplicaciones web, va a encontrar en OWASP ese referente, va a encontrar alguna herramienta, algún proyecto seguro que le va a resultar de gran ayuda, ¿no? Por lo tanto, para aquellos que no nos conozcáis, os animo a entrar en nuestra web, www.owasp.org. Desde allí también tenéis acceso al capítulo español de OWASP, y tenemos una lista de miembros donde podemos estar en contacto y coordinarnos para los diferentes eventos y proyectos que realizamos también de forma local en nuestro país. También quiero comentar brevemente que la conferencia IBWAS está abierta a todo el personal de la Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, no únicamente la conferencia de Bruce Schneier, sino todas las charlas, tanto las que se darán en este salón de actos como en las dos aulas. Como digo, cualquier persona que se acredite como profesor o estudiante de la universidad tendrá acceso gratuito, totalmente libre. Lo único que requerimos es que se registre, facilite sus datos a la entrada de las salas. ¿De acuerdo? Espero que las conferencias sean del agrado de todos vosotros. Por nuestra parte hemos puesto todo nuestro interés y esfuerzo en conseguirlo. Creo que hay ponentes de gran renombre y prestigio internacional como Bruce Schneier. Bruce, es todo un honor y un placer contar con Bruce en nuestro evento. Es reconocido y reputado criptógrafo, autor de numerosos libros. Es el autor de frases tan conocidas como la seguridad no es un producto, es un proceso, o la seguridad de la información involucra a personas, procesos y tecnología, ¿no? Estas frases que hemos oído tantas veces se deben a la persona que tenemos aquí en esta mesa, ¿no? Yo creo, sin más, únicamente comentar también que hay wifi gratuita tanto en el auditorio como en las dos salas. El SSID es IBWAS y el password es conference, ¿de acuerdo? Y para cualquier cosa estamos a vuestra disposición y que esperamos que sea de vuestro interés. Sin más, dejo la palabra a César Benavente.
Many thanks, Mr. Aguilera. So I would like to introduce right now a second conference chair. It's Mr. Carlos Serrao. He's from the Instituto Superior de Ciencias do Trabalho da Empresa, Instituto Universitario de Lisboa. He's an assistant professor at the Department of Information Science and Technology. He's also the Portuguese chapter leader of the OWASP. So,
buenos días a todos. These are the only words I will say in Spanish because, fortunately, my English is a little bit better than my Spanish. So, first of all, I'd like to welcome you all here at IBWAS, the first Iberic Conference on Web Application Security. This is one of the first international events that will be hopefully done by both the Portuguese chapter and the Spanish chapter of OWASP. I will just give a little bit, some few words about what are the main goals and the main objectives of this conference. First of all, one of the first objectives of the organization of this conference is to create among both the industry and the academy and the researchers, create a little bit of the awareness of the necessity of having to protect and to secure the application as being part of the overall security environment that we should have in the overall organization. So the basic idea of the Iberic Web Application Security Conference is to bring both the academy and also the industry, join them together to discuss and to present new ideas in order to improve the current environment of this kind of applications. So these were one of the first and very basic goals of this conference. The second one, perhaps one of the most important ones, is also because we think that both Portugal and Spain, we share some common and some interests. So it doesn't make too much sense that both our countries are separated in this kind of organization. So it makes sense that we join our efforts together in order to make this kind of events a little bit more, let's say, to open these events to a broader audience than the one that we could obtain by doing this individually. So this is something which was in the mind of both of us when we started organizing this thing. The idea is to make this event a regular conference. So the idea is to make it an annual conference that will take place this year. It took place in Madrid, in Spain. Next year probably will take place in Portugal, in Lisbon. So the idea is to make this a regular event where people from the industry and people from the academic and research community can meet together and discuss new ideas around the application security. This is basically the idea behind OWASP. And what have we set up for this conference? I think you all have the agenda now. You can see that we will have some common sessions that will take place at this room, at the auditorium. And then we have some parallel sessions that will take place in two different rooms. In some cases, we will have some research sessions in parallel with some industry sessions. So in one of the rooms, we will have some papers that were submitted by researchers and that will be presented by those researchers. And on the other room, we will have some talks from people from the industry. So from the agenda, you can see that you can choose the best session that meets your expectations and attend that session in order to take to get more value from this session. So the idea and the agenda is organized in 2 different days, in which the first day we'll have basically on the part of the morning we'll have some important presentations from some keynote speakers. One which was already talked about is Bruce Schneier, which I think I don't need to add anything else to what Vicente has already talked about him. And the other one will be given by Denise, which is one of the guys who is pushing the OWASP flag around the world. So he will be giving us a talk about what is the current status of OWASP and where do we want to be in the future. And then we will have, in the rest of the morning and the afternoon, we'll have some parallel sessions. Tomorrow, we'll have also the same type of organization of the conference. So basically in the morning, we'll have another keynote speaker. And in the afternoon, we'll have also some parallel sessions. And at the end, we have also another keynote speaker and a panel session in which we'll try to discuss here some of the things that we consider that the government should take care in terms of web application security for the next year. So this is basically the overall structure of the conference that we have prepared for you today and for tomorrow as well. I just want to thank everyone, in particular to the speakers which will be here at the conference, who have accepted our invitation to be here and to share their experience and their knowledge with all of us. So I wish you all a very nice and a very pleasant 2 days of the conference, and we hope we meet your expectations in terms of you expect from the conference. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Soral. So finally, I know you are anxious to hear the word from Mr. Schneier. Mr. Bruce Schneier, he is the Chief Security Technology Officer of British Telecom, as you know. He's a renowned security technologist and author of several books, several papers, and also he has a newsletter that every month is published. So he is going to introduce us a conference that is titled The Future of the Security Industry. So, in your hands.
Thank you, and good morning. So you're not going to hear any Spanish from me either. Just letting you know to start. So I hope everyone's English is up to this. I want to talk for the next hour about the security industry and what I see as the future of the industry. And I'm going to touch on a lot of different topics as I go, a lot of which I've written about before. And for more about what I'm saying, I sort of urge you to look at my website. There's a lot of things written about some of the topics I'm going to talk about. So let's start with a question. Why is security so hard to sell? Those of you who are in the industry know that it can be very hard to sell security, IT security and security in general, to customers. It's hard to convince companies to spend money on security. If you work within a company as a security professional, it's hard to convince your boss to spend money on security. In general, we find that companies, organizations spend a lot less on security than they should, than the threat warrants. And it's an interesting question to ask why. Why is it so hard to sell security? And I have 2 reasons. One is economic and one is psychological. So the economic reason first. Computer security is complex. Right? The threats are complex, the vulnerabilities are complex, the countermeasures are complex, the products are complex. Right? Universities like this offer degrees in this stuff. Right? This isn't easy. It's actually surprisingly common for the average techie to get confused. Right? Even trained security experts get it wrong again and again. Right? This stuff is hard. And it's so hard that security technologies, right, the products and services people buy, have gotten so complex that most buyers don't understand them. Right? I mean, sellers can't explain what they're selling. Buyers don't understand what they should be buying. If you ever go to a security trade show, I know there are a couple in London every year. There's a security conference that travels different European locations every year. In the US, there are probably half a dozen different security conferences. If you go to one of them, I invite you to perform an experiment. Go to the show floor where the companies are exhibiting their products and find a company you've never heard of, walk up to their booth and ask, "What do you do?" And then listen for about 5 minutes as they explain, and then step back and ask yourself, do you have any idea what this company does? And my guess is probably you won't. Not because what they're doing doesn't make sense, not because it doesn't work, not because it's snake oil, because what they're doing is so subtle and requires such a narrow understanding of the discipline that it's hard to explain. That the person you've asked is probably a marketing person who doesn't truly understand what his product does. Right? And this is a problem for our industry. Commerce to work requires a meeting of minds. The buyer wants to buy something, the seller wants to sell it. They get together and they make an exchange. Well, in computer security, it's looking more like this. Right? The buyers and sellers are talking past each other. And the result is that companies, organizations don't buy the security they need. Right? They either secure them, their networks, or they do what they're told by consultants or anybody they hire, or they engage in best practices, which is kind of code for, we don't know what we're doing, but we're going to do what they do, so don't sue us. Or they choose a big name and buy their stuff. And companies with new companies with new ideas or new products or new technologies have a lot of trouble in this market. It's very hard for a new company to break through because it's hard to get people to understand the value of what they're doing. You going to wait for me to drink to take a photo? So that's the economic reason. Now for the psychological reason. So there are two basic motivations in sales. There's greed and fear. And the first one is a lot easier to sell than the second. It's much easier to sell based on greed than it is based on fear. So the greed one is easy to understand, right? I want to buy this bottle of water because I want a bottle of water, right? So if someone wants to sell this to me, I'm likely to buy it because I want it. The fear sell is a little different. Right? I don't want to buy this bottle of water, but I know I'll get sick and dehydrated if I don't drink water, so I buy this bottle of water to avoid that. Right? A greed sell is because I want something. A fear sell is because I want to avoid something else. Right? The greed one is simpler. It's easier to understand. And people are more likely to buy based on greed. It's not that fear sells never work. People do buy computer security. They buy other things. But it's just harder. And it's true in other areas. People are reluctant to buy insurance because insurance is a fear sell. Or home security. That's a fear sell. Right? They do buy. These industries exist and they can be very profitable. But it's an uphill struggle. Right? It's not as natural as a greed sell. So this has been explained, I guess about 20 years ago, by something called prospect theory. And prospect theory is it's from economics, and it explains people making decisions under uncertainty. It's phenomenally interesting work. It's under the general guise of behavioral economics. And if you're interested at all, go Google it and start reading. It's really fascinating. And again, it's about people making decisions under uncertainty. And I'll sort of spare the details, but the results of prospect theory are that people are risk averse when it comes to gains and risk seeking when it comes to losses. Right? Which means when it comes to a greed sell, people don't like to take risks. When it comes to a fear sell, they are likely to take risks. Right? And so in a common experiment in prospect theory, we can demonstrate that people prefer a sure smaller gain than a risky larger gain. Right? In English, there's an expression: a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. That's what that means. When it comes to losses, people prefer a risky larger loss than a sure small loss. Now, this is surprising. I mean, the mathematics of risk makes this behavior irrational. Right? It doesn't make any sense that we should have this bias. And it's been very well documented. These experiments have been done across ages, genders, cultures. You can see them in other primate species with these same biases. Basically, our brains are hardwired to be risk averse when it comes to gains and risk seeking when it comes to losses. And this sort of puzzling behavior, very puzzling behavior, it's hard to overestimate how much this rocked the economics world, because conventional economic theory predicted this would not happen, that people would not behave this irrationally, and people do. It's been explained by evolutionary psychology, and the explanation is sort of looks like this. If you imagine a species living at the edge of survival, as species tend to do, then a sure small gain means you'll live to see tomorrow, and that's a good thing. A risky larger gain means you might die. So we have evolved to prefer the sure small gain than the risky larger gain. On the loss side, it's the reverse. Right? A sure small loss means you're dead. A risky larger loss means you might get lucky and survive. So we have also evolved to be risk-seeking when it comes to losses. It's absolutely fascinating, I think. Now, security is a choice between a sure small loss and a risky larger loss. Right? I can spend the money on the bottle of water, right, the sure small loss, or I can risk dehydration, the risky larger loss. Right? We have evolved to take the risk. Right? And you know this when you go to your boss and say, I need this computer security thing. I need this new firewall, this new IDS, this new auditing system. I need this to make our network secure. And your boss says to you, well, you didn't have it last month, and we're okay. So maybe we don't need it this month. Right? Let's take the chance. Let's take the risk. Right? You see that again and again. People prefer to take the risk. They don't always do it, but they are incented to take the risk. And actually, this is why the industry, the computer security industry, has tried to turn security into a greed sell. So Symantec many years ago had a slogan, we take care of security so you can concentrate on your business. That's an example, that's a way to pretend security is a greed sell. Or ROI models. Right? ROI models that try to show a positive financial return on security investment. Again, attempting to show that security is a greed sell. These tricks actually don't work. People don't believe them. They're not true. Security is fundamentally a fear sell. The alternative is to push the fear button really hard. Because even though people are risk averse, even though people are risk seeking when it comes to losses, people will also do anything if they're scared, to make themselves not scared. If someone is scared, they will do anything to make that feeling go away. Right? I've just explained United States foreign policy for the past 8 years. Right? Trying to make the fear go away. Right? When people are afraid, they want to feel safe. So you see this in a lot in security industries. Insurance, in the United States at least, sells with fear stories. Burglar alarms. I spoke to somebody who sells burglar alarms for a living, and he said nobody buys a burglar alarm unless they've been robbed or their neighbor's been robbed. Right? No one buys a burglar alarm unless they're scared. Or some of the IT threat reports published by Symantec and other companies. Right? I mean, they're big reports designed to make you scared of how bad it is out there on the internet. Right? These are attempts to push the fear button. They work better. You know, we can argue whether they're honest or honorable, but that is a common tactic in selling security. Right? Make people scared so they'll buy your thing not to be scared anymore. Also a common tactic in politics. All right, so let's talk about the history of the IT security industry, very generally. I think we can make the claim that the entire IT security industry is an accident. Right? It's just an artifact of how the computer industry developed. It's an artifact of how new the industry is and how fast it moves. Right? I mean, the problem is that nobody ever wants to buy security. Right? No one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to buy some security today. They want to buy the things they want, right? The greed cells. They want word processing or email or a social networking site or a game. Right? They want to do something. They want something positive. But because the IT products and services we all sell are inherently insecure, right? A computer security industry has sort of built up on the back end to fix that. Right? So people don't want to buy computer security, but they have to. Right? Contrast this with any other mature industry. It doesn't work that way. Right? It's not the case that when you buy a car, the dealer says on the way out, on your way home, you should really buy some brakes for that car. Right? The brakes are important. It's not really safe driving without them. We don't sell them, but there are lots of aftermarket companies that sell brakes. Buy a pair of brakes quickly. Right? That doesn't happen. But that happens in computer security all the time. Right? You buy your computer, and before you really should turn it on, you should buy some security things, right, to make your computing experience safe. So the current trend in computers, in IT, is cloud computing. Right? I mean, it's a sexy new name. We have software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. It's not really new. Now, in the 1960s, we called this time sharing. In the 1980s, we called this client server. In the 1990s, we called it managed services. Right? Now we call it cloud computing. I mean, the way to think of it, the way to think of cloud computing basically is your data on someone else's hard drive. That's all of these things. It's cloud computing, right? And it's all outsourcing. I mean, what it is having someone else do your stuff. And there are lots of examples, right? Salesforce.com is a common one from industry. Message Labs is an outsourced email filtering service. Most of you have outsourced email accounts, whether it's Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo or some other company that I don't know about that's popular here in Spain. Right, Google Docs is one. Social networking sites, Facebook, Bebo, again, whatever the one is popular in the Spanish language. Those are also, think of it, outsourcing services. Managed network services, outsourced help desk are examples. Again, your data on someone else's hard drive. And what we're seeing, over the decades is a fundamental tension between the cost of computing and the cost of networking. So in the beginning, in the 1960s, computing was very, very expensive. So it made sense to have the computer centralized at a university, at a company, some central location, and everybody would use a terminal to access the computer. I mean, those are your time-sharing systems. In the 1980s, computers got cheaper, right? We saw a lot of personal computers, and the data center sort of closed down, except for applications that either required very high-speed computing, which are still very expensive, or large databases, which are also expensive. So you had these client-server models, right, where stuff was on the client and stuff was done on the server. In the 1990s, networking got a lot cheaper. Right? You saw a lot more outsourcing. Now we're seeing, really the end state of all this. Computers have gotten so cheap, they're effectively free. From a corporate perspective, they're effectively free. Networking has gotten so cheap, it's effectively free. So the cost that dominates computing is the infrastructure costs, right? The facilities, the maintenance. Those are the costs that dominate. And again, it makes sense to consolidate and to put those data centers in the cheapest place possible. So for a lot of this cloud computing, we're seeing data centers in India, right, or in Southeast Asia, or in South America, or some African countries are trying to do more of this. We're seeing a lot more international outsourcing, and this is the end game, right? It doesn't get any cheaper than free. So these trends for outsourcing, for cloud computing, or whatever we're going to call it in the next 10 years, are going to continue. Right? More and more of our stuff is going to be on someone else's hard drive. Already, if some of the younger generation are very platform independent. Right? All of their stuff is out in the network, and they can use their computer, their phone, the computer at school, computer at a friend's house, to access all their stuff. The notion of people's stuff on their home, on their own computer, is becoming less and less. Right? As more of our stuff migrates into the cloud. Google is leading the way on this, but lots of other companies do it too. And again, this is the end state. Right? So what's happening? And I think these are the trends that are interesting. Users are becoming very sophisticated about IT, but not in the way we expected. Right? Users are becoming much more socially sophisticated and much less technically sophisticated. This is a surprise, but it shouldn't be. Right? All technologies go through this transition. The early adopters had to be technically knowledgeable, and the later ones didn't. The first cars were sold with a repair manual and a toolkit. You needed to be a mechanic to own an automobile. Right? Then that stopped. And it isn't until technologies become technically boring do they become socially interesting. So sites like Facebook or Twitter, all of these collaborative web, I guess Web 2.0 we're calling them, Web 3.0, the semantic web. All of these things stem from the fact that the technologies are now technically boring. That users don't care about details, they just care about results. Right? Lots of people don't care what device they're accessing their email on. Your computer, my computer, Mac, Windows, Linux, it's all the same. Cell phone, it's all the same. Right? So, and IT is becoming infrastructure. Right? Users don't care about the technical details. They expect providers to be technical intermediaries. So Google handles all the technology. And Google packages solutions for its customers. And Google is expected to provide something that works. And users don't care how. Even the technology I buy, 10 years ago when I bought a laptop, I cared a lot. What was the CPU? What was the clock speed? How much RAM was there? How big was the disk? That was all very important. I just bought a new laptop, and I have no idea the answer to any of those questions. Because it really doesn't matter anymore. Right? All I want is a laptop that works. Right? Does anybody here know what operating system Facebook uses? Right? No. And we don't care. It doesn't matter. All that matters is when I open up my web browser, I get there, and that it works. So IT is not only infrastructure, IT is becoming a utility. Right? It's something you need, like a desk or power or heat. When you get a job, you expect a desk and a chair and a stapler and a pencil and a computer and a telephone, right? I mean, it's part of the utility, it's part of the infrastructure of an office. Right? This is why ROI models make no sense. And you can't come up with an ROI model for a desk. It's just a desk. You can't come up with an ROI model for a computer. It's something you need. Right? What utility customers want is dependability, reliability, safety, security. Right? They want it to work and work well. And all utilities, all infrastructure is outsourced, right? All the time. And you can think of these outsourced pieces of infrastructure along a chain from highly commoditized to highly specialized. So here you might have power and water, cell phone services, credit cards, ISPs are over here, and then more differentiated services, maybe, cleaning services, cafeteria services, tax preparation, legal services, medical services. Right? All these are outsourced from the very commoditized, highly interchangeable, to highly specialized. Right? They're all outsourced. And in these outsourced services, security, reliability, dependability is part of the service. Right? So the future of security stops being a separate thing and starts being part of everything. Right? Security starts being included in the products and services we buy, in the outsourced products and services. Again, this is no different from any mature industry. Right? Your car comes with safety and security features built in. Your house comes with a door lock when you buy it. We expect our electrical equipment to be safe when we buy it. We expect when we go into a restaurant, the food and water to be, suitable for ingestion. I don't need to buy some, extra security against poison when I buy this bottle of water. Right? I expect it to be potable. Right? The safety is built into the bottle of water. It doesn't mean security disappears. Right? Security is sometimes a differentiating feature in a larger marketing campaign. For decades, cars have sold themselves on safety records. Right? Saab was probably the first, but other cars do that too. Food, you might think, tends not to be, but at least in the United States, there's a very large organic movement in food, and it really is a food purity movement. Right? Different food suppliers are using the organic label to basically sell, safer to eat, more healthful, and that's food purity. Right? So you do see security used in marketing campaigns, but it's part of the larger sell. So notice how this solves the two problems I started with. Right? It solves the economic problem, because security is now handled by the outsourcers, not by the end customers. So you don't have to understand computer security, because Facebook or Google, they do it for you. Right? More and more security is embedded in my operating system. Windows 7 has more security features than Vista did. or XP before. Right? In sort of every version of Windows, now they got an embedded firewall. Now they have embedded hard drive encryption. Now they have sort of a bunch more security features that are turned on by default. Better blocking of ports. When you buy a router now, the security features are much better than they were 5-10 years ago. Right? So it solves the economic problem by requiring the expertise at the intermediary where it belongs. Right? I mean, I don't have to understand water purity. I just know that Aquabona has, they understand it, and they've made it work. And I actually don't care how. It doesn't matter to me what technology this company is using to make its water drinkable. As long as they do it. Right? It doesn't matter. It also solves a psychological problem, because now security is wrapped up in a greed cell. Right? I want to buy the car. It comes with safety and security, but I want the car. Right? I want to buy the bottle of water. It comes with safe to drink inside it, but I'm buying the bottle of water. Right? I want to buy the computer. I want to go on Facebook. I want email. I want to use IM. Right? I want a cool iPhone. I mean, I want these things as greed cells, and they all have security embedded in. All right, so what does this mean? I'm claiming this is the future of the security industry. This is where we're all going. This is the world we're all going to live in. Well, infrastructure and utility sales are driven by two things: price and trust. So remember my continuum of highly commoditized to highly specialized. When infrastructure providers are interchangeable, the primary motivator is price. And actually, sort of way down at the end, power, water, heat, which I guess that's power, electricity. Right? Price is such a primary motivator that those tend to be regulated monopolies. And it's pretty much impossible to have a market, because people only buy on price and there are no margins. So in a lot of countries, those industries need to be protected by government in order to be financially viable. It's sort of a little bit over. Think of things like cell phones and credit cards. Where they're basically all the same. It doesn't actually matter which one you have. In those industries, it's interesting, a lot of effort goes into hiding price. I don't know how it is in Spain, but in the United States, it's pretty much impossible to figure out how much your cell phone costs. When you're making a choice between providers. They go through a lot of effort to make sure you never know how much it really costs. They advertise some price, but it's not real. Credit card companies too. A lot of effort goes into hiding price, because they know if they made price transparent, their margins would drop to zero and the business wouldn't be viable. Right? With the premium services, even the stuff in the middle, sort of out here, think of it again, tax preparation. I don't know if I mentioned payroll services, legal services, medical services, sort of at the far end of personal. Trust is a lot more important. Companies, people will regularly go to a higher price alternative because they trust them more. Sort of in here, you can also look at restaurants or hotels. Another example where they're sort of interchangeable, but there are differences. And trust is interesting, because what it means is, because the buyers don't have the expertise to evaluate the suppliers, they rely on something called signals. Right? So a signal could be a warranty, or a magazine review, or a recommendation from a colleague, or a generic reputation, or an award, or certifications. These are all signals that companies use. And if you think of IT, we use a lot of those. Right? IT companies use those signals to convince buyers that they are trustworthy. Right? That they can be trusted. Right? So this company, this bottle of water is trusted. Windows is a trusted operating system. That you can go on Facebook and trust that they will keep your data. Right? This is reputation. IT is going to become a reputations market. And if you think about reputations market, they have some characteristics. Right? So in a reputations market, a trusted seller does better. So what does that mean? That means well-known companies do better, larger companies do better, because size is a trust multiplier. If you trust a brand, you tend to trust them across everything they do. So bigger companies can leverage that trust over more products and make more money. Conservative companies tend to be more trusted. They take fewer risks. And in IT, you're going to see an environment where outsourcers care more about security than their customers do. Right, an example was the PCI standard. PCI is a credit card security standard. It's not a government standard. It was developed by the credit card industry, by Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Card Blue, another name who I forget that's from Japan, and I think some of the smaller ones. Yep. So what the standards, I mean, it's interesting. The credit card, there's a lot of loss of credit card data in merchant databases. And the credit card companies were fearing that this would cause people not to want to use their credit cards on the internet. I mean, credit cards are really the currency of the internet. You want to buy something on the net, you use a credit card. But that's the way the net works. And the credit companies were scared that this would that people wouldn't do this. Now, and so this data is sitting in corporate databases, for sort of large merchants on the net. Amazon is one, and there are millions of them. And criminals were stealing the data out of those databases. And the companies were protecting them, but not to the level the credit cards wanted. So they established this standard to force merchants to increase their security. So the reputation of Visa's reputation, was more important than the merchant's reputation, right? Because Visa's bigger. I mean, all the reasons why bigger needs more reputation. Right? So in a reputations market, outsourcers care more about security than their customers. Earlier this year, I was at a conference in London. And I was sharing a stage with someone from a big consulting company. I think it was Price Waterhouse. And we were talking about laptop encryption. And I was saying that a few years ago it was slow and I wouldn't recommend it. Now they've gotten so fast and so easy that I recommend everyone encrypt their laptops. Whether you buy PGP, I think PGP disk is free. Whether you turn on BitLocker in Windows, whether you use TrueCrypt. Whatever that I really recommend encrypting your laptop. That way, if you lose it, your data is safe. It's really easy, and you won't notice any latency at all. And people in the audience, basically, most of them, they don't encrypt their laptops. Then they were saying that. The person next to me, again from Price Waterhouse, said we've been encrypting our laptops routinely for the past 10 years, and that was interesting. Right? His security is greater than his customers, which makes sense. If one of his customers loses a laptop, they lose their data. If this consultant loses a laptop and loses one of his customers' data, he might lose all of his customers because his reputation is that important. Now, we saw this at my company, Counterpain. Our security was greater than our customers. We did outsource monitoring. And our security was greater than our customer's security because our reputation was more important than our customer's reputation. Right? And so you're going to see this. If you want to think about a reputations market, the one you have the most familiarity with are restaurants. I mean, restaurants are a reputations market. And you think about the way restaurants work. Right? Restaurants get a good reputation and people go to them, they get more crowded. Then maybe they get a reputation of being crowded, so fewer people go. Right? You get some equilibrium. Restaurants might get a good reputation, then they go bad, maybe they're sold, maybe they get a new chef, and the reputation goes down, but it goes down slowly. Right? The quality goes down fast, reputation goes down slower. There's a time lag. Reputations in a tourist market. right? You know, the restaurants in Plaza Mayor, right? They don't have to have a reputation because they make most of their money on tourists who don't even speak Spanish, who don't read restaurant reviews, right? You know, who are just there because of location. So reputation as a market isn't perfect, but it's a reasonable signal for quality. So another thing we're going to see is a bifurcation, is a splitting of the IT industry, of the outsourcing industry. There'll be a series of companies you have a business relationship with, and a series of companies you don't have a business relationship with. But companies you don't are companies like Google. Right? You know, we often think of ourselves as Google's customers. We're not. We're Google. We are Google's product, right, that Google sells to its customers, who are advertisers. And, you know, if you think about it, we have no business relationship with Google. We can use Google Search, we can use Gmail, we can have our calendar up on Google, we can use Google Docs for our spreadsheets, and yet we are not Google's customers. We have no business relationship with them. And there are lots of examples of this. I mean, it tends not to happen in the real world. It happens a lot on the internet. That some of the companies we interact with the most are companies we have no business relationship with. Right? In those instances, we don't really have any power. Right? There's not a lot of customer service in Google. Actually, there is customer service for their customers, right? Not for us. You know, you kind of take what you get. You don't like Facebook? You know, go elsewhere. You know, we're not Facebook's customers. The advertisers are Facebook's customers. So not a lot of power here. The other example is the companies we have a business relationship with. So Message Labs or Salesforce.com. Or maybe a company we buy storage for automatic backup. You know, in those, Amazon. Right? In those, we're the customer. We have more power, right? There's more customer service. You know, so watch that split. I think it's going to be important to see as we move forward. So what does this mean for the future of the IT security? You know, I don't want people to think that the security industry is going away. Right? That's just not true. You know, we still need new research, new ideas, new technologies, new products, new startup companies. Right? We need innovation as long as there still are threats. And the criminals aren't going anywhere. The hackers aren't going anywhere. Right? That's getting worse every year. Right? What changes is the nature of the industry. Right? The security industry stops being a consumer industry and starts being a business-to-business industry. Right? Security companies sell to the outsourcers, not to the end users. Right? The technologies sell to Google, to Facebook, to Microsoft, to HP, and to all of those, the companies who we outsource to. Right? Security comes embedded in the operating systems, in the hardware, in the software, in the services. And the IT industry will look a lot more like the automobile industry. Right? You know, so actually, I mean, there are technology conferences in the automobile industry. You know, we're just not invited to them here. So thank you very much, and I'll take questions.
Thank you. I would like to know what's your vision regarding big companies. Because you talk about...
Sorry, regarding which companies?
I'm sorry?
Regarding what kind of companies?
Big companies. I mean like banks and that already have a very big IT infrastructures that have their own data centers and a lot of people. Would you say that they would also, or that they are going also to outsource these kind of services?
I mean, they will. The banks will be the last. Actually, the military will be the last, but they will. And you know, history is sort of a guide. You know, I remember 20 years ago, every company said, we have to have our own PBX in our basement. We can never outsource that. And now, you know, at least in the US, that's all outsourced. Or when companies said, we must have our own modem banks. We can never outsource that. And now everyone does. Or we must be our own ISP. We can never outsource that. Now everyone does. You know, more and more is being outsourced, even by large companies. More companies, over the past few years, are outsourcing their email infrastructure. You know, to Google, you know, my company BT does that, does outsourced email. And these are critical infrastructure. So I think more and more you're going to see even companies like banks outsourcing their IT, just like they outsource their payroll, they outsource their tax preparation, right? They outsource their power and water, they outsource their cafeteria services, the guards in their lobby. I mean, all of these things are outsourced. You know, and it is happening more. When I started doing outsourcing in 1999, you know, a lot of companies wouldn't even dream of doing it. You know, now, surprisingly big companies outsource their entire IT infrastructure. And that is going to be the future because the economics of it are so compelling. You know, it makes such financial sense. Now, you've got to get the contracts worded right? Because there are liability issues, there are concerns, but fundamentally it's about trust. And there will be a point where even the banks will trust the outsourcer. Now, there are also jurisdictional issues. So, for example, you know, in Switzerland, outsourcers for banks, you know, must reside in Switzerland. That there are laws about moving data outside borders. That's fine. In the United States, we're seeing one company already building an outsourced service that is secure to U.S. military classified. Right? So their idea is they're going to let the U.S. military outsource some of their IT. But for the U.S. military has requirements that are greater than commercial enterprises. So this will be a higher level of security outsource service. So you're going to see outsource services appear to handle some of these specialized requirements. Right? Just like, you know, this water is drinking water. If I wanted water that was pure enough for laboratory experiments, I'd buy somebody else's water. So some of those specialized requirements will happen slower. So banks and militaries, governments, I think that'll happen slower, but it will happen. Because everybody outsources infrastructure all the time. I mean, it just makes too much financial sense.
Would you say that certifications and reviews, tests, etc., specifically for those services would be also raising?
Yeah, I think I will, because that's what the contract's going to look like. The contract's going to, you know, the RFP, the RFI, will say we want an outsourced service and we need it to have these certifications, right? Or sort of these, and they might be certifications in security, and reliability, and dependability, in geography. You know, it might be a certification. You know, we've certified this data never leaves Switzerland. Right? We've certified this data never leaves the EU. So, you know, so yes, certifications will be a proxy that buyers will use. Right? And there actually might be a certification on this bottle of water if I look here. It's a really small print. But there might be some kind of certification on this bottle of water. Right? That says there's been some testing lab that tested the purity of it. And I don't know if this is true in the EU. In the United States, we have something called Underwriters Laboratory. And they certify electrical equipment, like lamps and, you know, refrigerators. And then they certify the safety of electrical equipment. And that certification company actually showed up in the 1900s because there were, in the early days of electricity, there were a lot of electricity fires. You know, houses would burn down because the electrical equipment would catch on fire. And insurance companies got tired of paying for these claims and basically said that unless your house only has equipment certified by Underwriters Laboratory, we will not pay on insurance claims. And so there's a certification that was industry-led that appeared. So yeah, I mean, certifications will be a very important part of the future.
How do you see that the risk that is involved in terms of security of outsourcing all these kind of services in IT?
So the question was about the risk of outsourcing.
Yeah.
So I want to make a note because I think it's a really good idea to talk about certification next time I give this talk. I mean, the risks of outsourcing are not fundamentally different than the risks of doing it yourself. I mean, in all cases, we need to trust our suppliers. So we have to trust our hardware suppliers, our operating system suppliers, our software suppliers. Right? Any one of those companies can, compromise our security, can lose our data. I mean, we've all had experience of bad software losing our data. And this is just another level of the trust chain. Right? We have to trust our outsourcer. So it's not fundamentally different. I mean, just as the Microsoft operating system can have bugs that hackers can use to get at our data, outsourcers can have bugs in their services and products that allow hackers to get at our data. Right? So that's not fundamentally different. I mean, there are differences in quality because now there's another layer of trust. We also have to worry about international. And a lot of consumers don't even think about that, but the different laws. Right? If a European's data goes out of the EU, then the European Data Protection Act no longer applies. In the United States, there are laws, largely ignored, but there are supposed to be laws against government access of our data without a warrant. If our data moves, let's say from the United States to Canada, as soon as it crosses that international border, those protections disappear. Right? So there's legal risk in terms of jurisdiction. But fundamentally, this is all about trust. And we're already trusting a lot more than we really pay attention to. So this is just sort of one more layer to trust.
Yeah.
But it's not fundamentally different.
Okay.
Well, I certainly agree with analysis of computing capacity as a commodity and security being part of the full package. But what it sounds a bit strange is the idea that the user, the customer, would be satisfied. The only thing he's looking for is a nice service. Mm-hmm. No matter what inside, I'm just looking for the final result. That's okay. I mean, I can live without being an information security expert. But on the other side, I need to know my rights, like fundamental rights, like to privacy or safety. Now, in this picture, I mean, how do you see the role of governments or other, public institutions in the protection of this, for example, the right to privacy? As we were discussing before, I mean, one of the main issues here that we are going to have big operators giving as a service computing and managing at the same time a lot of personal data. Google is an example. Amazon is another quite big example as well. So what's the role of the governmental institution from one side, and how do you think they are going to find the right balance between liability of companies and privacy and safety on the other side?
So there's a large role in government. I mean, so it's not true that people understand their rights. People tend not to. I mean, I took a taxi here. I had actually no clue what my rights are with respect to taxis. Right? Taxi is an outsourced, automobile service. I don't have the faintest idea what my rights are. And I don't know what my rights are with regards to this bottle of water, or the hotel I stayed at last night, or the restaurant I ate at last night. We outsource all the time. We have no idea what our rights are. And that's actually why government is important. Right? The reason taxis work is because whether it's the city of Madrid or the country of Spain, there are regulations regarding taxis. So there's regulations and licensing, and there's a whole infrastructure that I don't even know about that ensures that the taxi I get into is safe, and there's a driver that, you know, basically knows how to drive and hopefully a little bit about the city and knows where I'm going and hopefully doesn't cheat me, right? The meters are regulated, right? So government has a huge role in outsourcing because people tend not to know their rights. They tend not to know. I mean, they're unable to make a good buying decision, right? You know, I actually can't go to a taxi driver and say, you know, let me look under the hood. Let me, you know, prove to me you're a good driver. You know, I can't do that. Right? You know, we come into this room, and we're all really sure the ceiling won't fall on us. Not because we inspected the plans, or because we've inspected the building, because we know that the building codes here in Madrid are good. We trust them. So we trust government to protect us. And you know, that'll be true for IT. I think there'll be a very large role for government. And whether it's privacy laws, or maybe, you know, licensing for ISPs. I mean, you can think of a lot of different ways government can get involved. And the question you ask is, how does the government find the right balance? Well, you know, they do okay. You know, they try, they fail, they get better. I mean, how does it work? You know, we've spent hundreds of years getting building codes right. You know, health codes in restaurants. You know, there's sort of a lot of examples of, you know, we get it right slowly and iteratively. So you don't get it perfect the first time, you get it okay the first time. Then you do a little better. Or maybe you make it, you know, the regulations are too much, and then they're backed off some.
Don't you think that this approach, I mean, let's say improvement by mistake in terms of laws or rules can be quite dangerous, extremely risky?
It can be dangerous. It's worse not to do it. So yes, I mean, and we have to get used to this in IT. In IT, we like to get the answer. Because the way technology works, social systems don't work that way. So yes, I mean, it can be dangerous to get it wrong. But it can be more dangerous, you know, not to do it at all because you're guaranteed to get it wrong. Right? I mean, a world where there's no health codes for restaurants is worse than a world with imperfect health codes for restaurants. Right? Fewer people die of food poisoning if the codes are okay but not great. If there are no codes at all, you know, I'm a tourist, I come to Madrid, I don't know anything, go to a restaurant, you know, I need something to tell me it's going to be safe to eat there. But I can't inspect the kitchen. So yeah, now this is imperfect, it's iterative, but it's the way social systems work.
Hi. Although I fully agree that IT will be, IT security will be integrated within the applications and the infrastructure, what's your standpoint on the application development security integration? Because right now, from my feeling, my point of view is that although applications are very much outsourced the development, and companies, even financial institutions and public administration does outsource the applications, they don't fully trust the outsourcers on doing the security properly. Right. So all the security checks and balances are done on the company that provides the applications, because even though the development is outsourced, once the application is finished, the intellectual property and the trust that the application is running on my web server or my giving a service is on the user of the application. So it doesn't seem to be as coupled, and the trend doesn't seem to be that as applications outsourcers, companies will implement the security features, but rather that the buyers of the applications will implement them afterwards.
Yeah, that's going to change, right? To think of the future, look at Gmail. You can't add security features to Gmail. It is what it is, and you get it or you don't. Your options are use it or not use it. You can't call up Google and say, "I'd like another 50 euros of security, please." They'll hang up on you. Actually, they probably don't have a phone number you can call. Right? Facebook is the same way. So that's the future, where it's all outsourced, where companies don't add third-party security. They're only doing that because they, as you said, they don't trust the outsourcers. And that notion is going to disappear. Companies will trust the outsourcers because outsourcers will be trustworthy. Right? You don't buy a car if you don't trust the automobile manufacturer. You don't say, I like this car, but I don't trust them, so I'm going to add some more, security and safety. You don't do that. Right? It's part of the sale. And if you don't trust the car, you don't buy it. Period. End of story. So we're not there yet, and it might take another 5 years to get there. But that's what IT is going to look like. Right? You will trust the outsourcer. You won't add third-party security. Now, you can imagine an outsourcer that takes, let's say, if you have more security, let's say you're a bank, and your security requirements are higher than for sort of, an average person. So there might be a company that, that goes to other outsourcers and consolidates and adds security and then sells it to you, but it's still going to be some outsourcer doing it. Right? It's still going to be some other outsourcer who's going to package that solution. You're not going to do it anymore. This is going to be slow in coming. But already we're seeing, the market in personal firewalls just disappear because it was embedded in Windows. Right? We're going to see the market in hard drive encryption collapse over the next 5 years. Right? Now that it will be in every copy, of Windows 7 sold. Why would PGP disk exist? They're competing with free. Right? They're competing with embedded in, push a button and it turns on. Right? So all those things start disappearing. Oh, just shout.
Same question I asked Poland. So, on what can OWASP do to help, moving forward and basically increasing the security, making sure that we move security into the systems that.
See, but I think OWASP is. I think the reason OWASP sort of appeared from nowhere and suddenly became actually important is because of this trend. Because look at OWASP, right? It's web application security, right? Security embedded in the web application. Not security the end user buys and installs his computer, but security that's in the web application. And that's what the future looks like, right? Security embedded in the products and services that the users want. So I think, OWASP's success is really a testament to this idea. And you guys are going to become more and more vital. Because more and more web applications are going to need security embedded in them. You're going to get calls from Flickr to say, our security isn't up to snuff. We need to do this. So all the techniques and things done here in OWASP become very important because you're working in the layer where security now matters. Right? At the web applications, at the server end, at the outsourcer. That's where security matters. So, you guys are great.
So what I think is interesting about the crowd, right, is that. So what I think is interesting about, especially like the crowd in this conference, is that a lot of the people here are probably new to OWASP. They're probably kind of still getting their heads around and they kind of know in almost maybe let's say the application security club, right? They probably don't go to Black Hat, or if you go, probably know all of them. They're still getting their heads around. So what would be your recommendations for them to get into the industry? Because I think we can agree that there's a lot of stuff still to do. There's a lot of opportunities, and how do you view OWASP and them, and how moving forward and improving their careers?
I'm not sure about the policy. I get asked all the time, what to do to improve careers. And my advice is always do what you want. That there's so much needed in security all over the place that you're better off following the aspect that interests you rather than trying to figure out what will be important. It's all going to be important. For the foreseeable future. The topics I think need the most work are not the core technical topics, but the topics around it. So we have all the algorithms and protocols. We need work in secure code design or user interface, right? Installation, configuration, data deletion, and especially in the socio-technical systems, where you have technical systems interacting with society. Right? ID cards, voting machines, payment systems. the security around there, because they have a human component and are not just file security, are much more interesting, much more subtle, much more complex. So those are the areas I like to see research, and I think those are the areas I think are going to be the most important moving forward. But if you like to do algorithms, cryptography, do it. I mean, it's still interesting, it's still needed, it's still a great career. So my advice is always follow what you want. And don't try to second guess what's going to be needed. It's all going to be needed.
Just one simple question: how do you trust the outsourced services? How?
I mean, it's a good question. How do I trust a doctor? How do I trust a restaurant?
And, another one. Mm-hmm. Who trusts?
Well, it's a good question, and trust tends to come from society, right? And sort of I have to trust. If I'm using Gmail, I have to trust Gmail. How do I come to trust them? Reputation. Right, on reputation. Now, it might be misplaced. I mean, when I go to a doctor, I rarely, look at the certification. I never check if it's a forgery or not. How do I trust a doctor? Now, a doctor is really personal and really intimate. Right? He could kill me, right, through neglect. Right. So do I trust him because I like the way he looks? I mean, is a good personal demeanor? I mean, so remember, this is the notion of a signal, what I talked about. What is a signal I use to a doctor? Now, you're right. If he has a good personal demeanor, it's a crappy signal, right? I mean, a personal demeanor does not translate to good medical knowledge. But yes, that's how we do it. But really, I go to a doctor because it's been recommended by a friend, so a trusted introducer. Maybe nowadays, at least in the United States, there are lots of websites where you can look up doctors, right? So I might use that. I might use a doctor that's recommended by another doctor I trust, or a hospital I trust. I happen to live in Minnesota. It's near the Mayo Clinic, world-renowned medical facility. So any doctor associated with the Mayo Clinic, I sort of automatically trust. How do I trust a restaurant? I don't know. I mean, it looks clean. I like it if it's crowded with locals, not tourists. Right? So I go in and make sure everyone's speaking Spanish. Right? That makes me feel better. So there are different mechanisms. And so these signals are often subtle. They're social. Now, they're not perfect. But it is how we do it. How do we trust an automobile? How do we trust, anything? Our cell phone provider, a tax provider. How do I trust a taxi? I just take one at random. They all look the same.
Don't you think that certification would be a better answer for trust?
In IT, certification will be. Yes. And that sort of works in a lot of these instances. I mean, the reason I have this very sloppy system about restaurants is I know they're all certified. I mean, I know they've all had health inspections. If I'm in a third world country, maybe I have to be a little more suspicious. So if I'm on the streets of Morocco and I'm looking for a restaurant, I'll look a little bit more. Now, here in Madrid, I figure any restaurant's going to pass a health code. Right? Any taxi's going to be okay. But yes, certifications are very important. And in IT, you're going to see more explicitly. So might be called out in contracts. Whereas in a lot of areas, they're very implicit. I know they're there sort of if I think about it, but I don't even think about it. I don't even think that this building has been certified to a building code. I don't even think about it, even though it's true.
Contract stipulations are already there. You yourself now work for DC.
Yeah, they are, but these are not as common. I think it's going to be a lot more explicit. This is still a rarity, but yes.
Of course, regulation as well.
Right, but I think there'll be a lot more of that.
And in respect to, I judge differently a restaurant healthcare system. There's probably a lower possibility of dying from the restaurant than your doctor injecting you with something.
Yeah, and if a doctor's, I think it's more negligence than malice. Same thing in restaurants. Restaurants don't actually try to kill their patrons. It's bad for business. Right, they just,
It's also good for stock supply.
Right, it's right. But they do it by accident. They say, oh, let's use this meat even though it's a week old. That's the sort of thing you'll do. Yeah, right. He's flying back to America tomorrow. By the time he gets sick, he'll be on the plane. We'll never know, right? And there are restaurants. See, this happens in Italy. I don't know if it happens here. That locals and tourists get different types of food. So no, this isn't perfect.
Just one point. With the medical industry, if you're not happy with your doctor, you also have the opportunity of seeking a second opinion. And in many cases, it's advisable because doctors have a very poor understanding of risk or symptoms.
Right.
So do you still see third-party verification as being important?
It depends. Remember my continuum from commodity to specialized. At the highly specialized, legal services, medical services, things like second opinions, right? You'll get. No one ever gets a second opinion for their cell phone. It's your cell phone, right? So IT will be sort of in the middle. So maybe for some very specialized things, they'll be so specialized that you'll get multiple bids and they'll look very different, which is kind of like a second opinion. But for stuff like an ISP, you probably won't. Yeah, right. So it'll depend on how specialized what you're doing is. The highly commoditized stuff you don't. The highly specialized stuff you do. All right. So with that, I think I have to get off stage.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.